All righty. Well, welcome back to My Metabolic Life. And today is a little bit of a different story in that we kind of do three different things on this channel, but this is one of the first times exclusively doing this type of an interview. I do informational things about metabolic health, ketosis, and all the health related topics on that. I interview people who've overcome some amazing health obstacles. And some of those people also happen to be health coaches. And I was interviewed by Casey a month ago or more than on his channel and with his program. And today I'm going to introduce you to Casey Ruff. And Casey and I both work with people. He goes much farther than what I do. I work with people with medical conditions and try to help them reverse them and lose the weight. Casey takes that to a whole nother level because Casey is also a personal trainer, personal health performance optimizer. This guy is trained and has like 16 different certifications from personal trainer, personal enhancement specialist, certified personal trainer, nutrition coach, carnivore coach, advanced program design, everything from kettlebells to cycles and lifting free weights. He can do the whole thing. So if you're looking for somebody to turn you into the next Adonis, Casey's your man. But Casey's got a pretty interesting story that I'm aware of. And there might be new things that I learn of because maybe you have medical conditions that have reversed with all this that I haven't heard yet. If so, I want to hear about them. But right now, I'm going to turn this over to Casey. I'm just going to sit here and shut up, and we're going to hear about what kind of led Casey into adding things within the carnivore and nutritional ketosis and metabolic therapy worlds into his world, because it's not a place where your average personal trainer is at. So I'm going to let Casey tell his story, and I'm going to shut up. Casey, take it away.
Well, Brett, thank you so very much for having me on. It's such an honor to be with you. I had a great time hosting you on our show, like we said, and hosting your good friend, Dr. Cooley, as well, which comes out soon. So thank you for the opportunity. Really, when you think about it, like I've been personal training for 17 and a half years. So if there's 17 certifications listed, that's really only one certification a year on average. It's not that impressive. Let's not get the expectations up too
No.
high. Oh, man. So, yeah, so I was always kind of interested in fitness. I grew up kind of the chubby kid, but I really liked sports. I loved ice hockey. Loved our local semi-pro hockey team here in Salt Lake City, an affiliate of the Calgary Flames. But again, I was kind of the chubby kid growing up, and I got into a bit of a scrap when I was 12 years old, and from then I wanted to lift weights and get a little stronger. And so I was a kid that had the old weight sets down in the basement with all the programs and lifts and everything taped up on the walls, and just really like to pursue that. I got a job as just kind of a front desk at a gym when I was in high school. And then after, while I was in college, I was actually studying architecture. I wanted to be an architect. But at the same time, I also needed a place to train in the off season for cycling that I was doing quite a bit at the time. And so I joined a gym to train in the off season. And I started watching the personal trainers and thought that, what they were doing looked really fun and engaging. And they were helping to teach people like different exercises that I'd known about. And also one thing that was really unique is they were using heart rate monitors quite a bit, which I had been using for several years with my own cycle training at the time. And so I thought it might be fun, at least temporarily, to get a job as a trainer while I was studying architecture. So I went into the office and asked the manager what I needed to do. He pointed out the primary certification that I needed to get. So over the course of the next 3 or 4 months, I hit the books and ended up passing that test and got my certification and got hired on in March of 2007. Um, like I said, the expectation at the time was not necessarily that I would be doing this as a career. I mostly just kind of wanted to do it to help get me through college. But, you stick with something for long enough and keep going. And it's been a really enjoyable journey. And so I'm still doing the same thing today, which I absolutely love. When they brought me on as a personal trainer, I did know more about heart rate and heart rate training than probably any of the other trainers. So I had that as a bit of an advantage to get started. And very soon after I started, they trained me on how to use not only heart rate monitors, but also how to use metabolic carts. We were one of the only gyms that I knew of at the time that was utilizing a metabolic cart, which is a tool that is used to assess somebody's metabolism, meaning how many calories somebody would be burning, either if they were in a resting state, just kind of sitting around doing nothing, how many calories would they burn naturally, or how many calories somebody would burn as they were exercising, and also measuring like the amount of oxygen that was coming into the body. So classically, that's known as like a VO2 kind of a test. So a lot of endurance athletes would be interested in seeing how high their VO2 max was to see what their high end performance would be. So I was trained up in a lot of that stuff. And in the beginning, we were using that primarily on the caloric front to teach people how many calories they were burning as they were exercising, but also how many calories they should be eating based on their goals. So, for example, if you came in for a resting test, we put you in a comfortable chair, have you lay down for about 20 minutes. I then take the data, work the data as I needed to get the lowest baseline average that out for 24 hours. Let's say that number was 2,000 calories. So, Brett, I would tell you your resting metabolic rate is 2,000 calories. What do you do for job? How active are you during the day? You would tell me not very active or super active. I'd select the slider. Maybe that's another 500 calories. And then I'd also ask you how many calories do you burn in a week during exercise? So maybe that's another 500 calories a day that you average for exercise. So that would mean your total daily burn would be about 3,000 calories. And then we would have little sliders saying like, okay, what is your goal? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to gain weight? And what rate would you like to lose weight or gain weight? And the sliders would not allow you to go less than your resting metabolic rate, because we knew even back then that if you did a severely calorically restricted diet and ate less than your metabolic rate would then come down, and you would actually teach yourself to burn less and less calories, which is not the effect that we wanted. But as long as we were above that kind of baseline, if I said your resting metabolic rate was 2,000 calories, you burn 3,000 calories in a day, I could take that slider all the way down through some combination of increasing the exercise or decreasing the food, give you a target. Say your target calories would exercise exactly the same that you are, but we're going to have you eating 2,000 calories. That is a delta of 1,000 calories every single day. If I multiply that by 7 days in a week would be 7,000 calories lost. So we would say, great, a pound of fat is 3,500 calories. So that means in 1 week, you will lose 2 pounds. By week 2, you will have lost 4 pounds. By week 3, you will have lost 6 pounds. And it's a very linear type of a weight loss. And what we noticed with people is they were really lazy slobs who could not track their calories. They did not exercise the right way that we told them to. Nobody was able to make this work. Somebody would absolutely lose weight for the first week. And we'd say, great, you're doing such a great job. And then the weight loss would slow down and slow down and slow down as we realized that people were becoming lazier and slobbier. It's ridiculous. It's fun. I mean, it's funny to look back on now. Like, that's the perfect reaction, is like, and that's the way I could sell this idea to people, is like, have you ever had this done or had this, idea that a diet or a workout program,
The
exactly.
same exact stuff that we taught in our
Oh, man.
corporate wellness coaching. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's so, again, it doesn't work, and all these people are failing, and we're thinking it's the people that are screwing this up, and they're not motivated enough clearly to be able to carry this out, because otherwise they would have just lost that 2 pounds a week until they reached their target weight, and then they could increase their calories back up again. We didn't really understand how a lot of that was working. Our metabolic carts were also very unique in that they could go a step further and not just tell people how many calories they were burning or how much oxygen somebody was intaking. They could also tell you how much carbon dioxide was being released as a byproduct. And what that does is tell you not only how many calories you're burning, but where are the calories coming from. When you burn your two different fuel sources, mainly fats and carbohydrates, they produce a different amount of carbon dioxide as a byproduct when you exhale. So if you're measuring that, not only can I tell you you're burning 12 calories a minute, but I could also tell you that you're burning 90% fat and 10% carbohydrates at a certain intensity, or maybe for other people that might be 80% carbohydrates and 20% fat. And honestly, in the beginning, when we first started with this, we didn't really focus on that side of things because we didn't really understand how to improve that for people. And if we did, it was mostly during exercise. So getting people to exercise in proper heart rate zones, work on base training, as we call it now, or zone 2 training that a lot of people know of. And it wasn't until 2012 that we were doing a call. This was a guy we contracted with another company, and he was working with very high end endurance athletes, namely Ironman triathletes. And he was telling us that, especially in different times of the year, the less intense times of the year, you could actually change an athlete's diet and feed them lots of fat, and their bodies would get used to using fat as a fuel source and would switch from primarily burning carbohydrates to then primarily burning fat. The only thing I knew of as an endurance athlete at the time is you'd burn so much carbohydrate and you only store just a tiny amount of carbohydrate in the body. And
Yep.
most people would understand what it's like when you run out of energy, you bonk, as they say, or hit the wall. So you have to be eating tons and tons of carbohydrates before, during, after these events. Where this guy is saying, no, actually change the diet, eat lots of fat. My athletes eat cream and bacon and butter, and now they don't need to take as many calories with them. They don't need to eat as they're competing at the highest levels of triathlon
Sure.
because they're burning fat as fuel, and you store tons of calories of fat, even if you're very, very lean. So this was like kind of mind blowing, and the first time that I'd ever been introduced to the idea that fat could be something useful for somebody. Um, Later on, I came across the work of Nina Teicholz and was introduced to the concept of the big fat surprise. Um, he started to learn that fat was, actually an okay thing and not to fear it. I decided to get certified as a official nutrition coach back in 2017. And the company that I got certified with was very well respected. They're one of the most well respected kind of nutrition coaching companies, and that almost re-indoctrinated me into the idea that you needed whole grains, you needed fruits and vegetables, you wanted to balance your meals, and tell people to make lots of snacks and make sure they're meal prepping. And we would give them reference points of, like, based on your hand, how much carbohydrate you would need in a meal, and how much protein you need in a meal, and how much fat you need in a meal, and all these different things. So I got more into that and started again coaching people on more balanced meals. It's certainly not anything like ketogenic or the stuff that I do now. During this time as well, we were also, as part of working with this company, we were forced, not forced is a strong word. We had to, as employees of this company, get people to sign up for weight loss contests that the company would host. They
Yep.
decided to pilot something back in, I want to say it was 2014, where they did a 3-month challenge. They called it the 90-day challenge. And they realized that if they made it a big deal and got trainers involved and discounted our services, they would make a ton of money. They realized that they made lots of money, so they were doing that twice a year. They got smart and said, well, we're making so much money, let's shorten this to 60 days and let's do this 4 times a year. So every 3 months we would have to do this contest that we weren't really compensated for, which is part of working there. We'd have to sign people up. We would give them big packets of information of all the different workouts and shopping lists and, delicate, like really over the top recipes with ingredients like rutabagas and like arrowroot powder and like all these obscure things to help somebody lose weight. And the compliance percentage as a company, the number that I heard was about 15%, meaning if you signed up for this contest, you would have a 15% likelihood of standing on the scale at the end of the contest, regardless of whether you got good results or not. So what you created is a bunch of trainers who are burned out on a program that people wouldn't do. And as like, if you signed up, Brett, you would not be likely to do this 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. If you already did it once, you got all the information and it failed, you didn't like it, like, you would not just sign up for it again and
Sure.
again and again and again. So we'd have to go find new people all the time, and it was incredibly frustrating. Um, in one of these contests, this is back in 2018, I was paired up with another employee of the company who was kind of, he had to sign up for this thing, and he was describing his diet. And he's the kind of guy that was like, I want to lose 25 pounds. I'm waking up in the middle of the night because I'm starving. I'm eating bowls of cereal. And it's like, okay, I recognized at the time, like, at least you're not getting any, protein and fat in the diet. So just increase the protein and fat that you're getting. Hopefully that makes you more full, and maybe you'll eat less of the sugar. I think that would be an okay thing. And he came back to me 2 or 3 days later and said, I've already lost like 2 pounds. What is this keto stuff? And I was like, I mean, that's really good weight loss. We never got anybody to lose weight that quickly before. And I've seen that name keto, but kind of like you in your story, like, I didn't know what keto was really. Um, but he was getting good results, and we wanted him to get good results, obviously. And so that was kind of the day that I wanted to dig in and see what is this, what is keto, why is it that my nutrition manual basically has one sentence that says when you burn fat, you break it down into molecules called ketone bodies. And that's kind of it. Like there's another paragraph somewhere else in the book that mentions it, but it doesn't go into any detail and talks about the risks of going into ketosis. When what I'm seeing with this guy and later myself and later other clients is actually like I don't see much risk, and people are losing lots of weight and they're feeling really good, and they're able to maintain muscle mass really well, which we were validating on body fat scales. And anyway, this guy wins the contest. We get recognized as being the ones that like helped him through, which is great for us. My wife and I, who work for, yeah, right, for the same company, we got some, we got some recognition for that, which is cool. But what we realize is like, we, if we're going to do these weight loss contests, and the company doesn't exactly know what we're telling people, we're kind of like on an island out here in Utah. Why don't we find different meal plans? Why don't we approach this differently? Let's take anybody who's doing, this kind of contest with us. Let's put them on a ketogenic meal plan. So I was downloading meal plans from different websites that were just simply low carb. They weren't difficult. They weren't elaborate. It could have been salads or taco bowls that just omitted the rice or the tortillas. And, maybe it was different versions of pizzas that they can make with their families and stews or whatever, all these different things. We just gave our people these meal plans, told them to eat as much of them as they want, not to count, not to control for calories. And we started running this for all of these weight loss contests. And we were tracking, again, using weight loss scales that would measure body composition. And our total, before we had to stop during the pandemic, is we had put, I want to say it was about 160 people through the program. We were weighing out, I think we weighed out about 122. So already the compliance was in the like 60%. So people stuck with it. People lost 732 pounds total, and 720 of those pounds that they lost, validated by the body fat scale, came from fat. So we were helping people lose not only weight, like, like if you go on any diet, you can lose weight, but you're going to lose everything. You're going to lose water, lean mass, muscle mass, all kinds of stuff you don't want to lose. These people were losing fat, and it was amazing. It was like fun. We always had a winner in a contest. People, we tracked one time the difference between the people that signed up for one contest and would re-sign up for the second contest. And we would take a look at the washout period in the 30 days between when somebody weighed out versus somebody weighed in. We found that, with any other contest, of course, people would gain their weight back. And in this washout period, we found that people maintained their weight loss. Like you couldn't do that. Nobody did that. I mean, it was amazing. And so that was kind of, it for me, like, yeah, totally mind blown. Why is it that I'm telling people to do exactly the opposite of what I've been told to tell people that I found really difficult to maintain myself? I couldn't meal prep that way. Yet people do the opposite. They feel great. And it wasn't just that they would lose weight. They were feeling good. Like their athlete's foot magically went away and their joints felt way better and their skin cleared up. And like all these other stories that you would hear, their kids behaved better in school. And it was like, oh my goodness, like whatever we found here is pretty remarkable. This is what I'm going to do. Like, I don't care what way it is. People are paying me to help them get good results. I'm going to help them get good results. And so far, this looks like it's, going to work for people. I kept learning about it and make sure it was safe and that we were doing things in an ethical way. And people started to figure out what I was doing. And I earned the nickname Keto Casey, which at the time I hated because I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be pigeonholed into that thing. And eventually I sat down with a manager who said, look, just own this, like know more about this than anybody else and just be that guy. And so that was kind of my journey into low carb, and eventually carnivore came into the picture. But yeah, it was a combination of using the metabolic carts to validate how people were burning fat, how that was helping, not only somebody like myself who was really interested in endurance sports, but also everyday people who just wanted to lose weight. They just wanted to burn lots of fat. And the combination of the weight loss contests that we were forced to do, that when we were giving people, the low carbohydrate meal plans, they were just getting tremendous success. So that was kind of how I got into all of this to begin with.
Oh my God. I mean, in what you're just reminding me of here, and you're aware of my story and how I kind of broke my brain in 2018. And it was this one TED talk by Dr. Sarah Hallberg out of Purdue University in Indiana. And it's got like 30 million views now. And it's called "To Reverse Diabetes and Obesity, You Have to Ignore the Guidelines." Because basically what you're just kind of saying is the same thing, is is that you have to go against almost everything that you were trained and certified and what all the protocol was. And when you just get people eating real food and cut out the processed carbs, obviously exercise is going to help with everything in the body. But you go against what the narrative is that everybody lives within, and you find the success.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. She was a wonderful person. I have her book here. I don't know if you've seen
Oh,
this.
yeah.
It's such a good book, Status Quo Thinking. I know you and I are both fairly emotional kind of people, and I can tell you, like in the introduction, I cried a good 2 or 3 times for sure. She was a wonderful gem to our community. Unfortunately, lost a battle with cancer eventually, but yeah, even she was extended her diagnosis quite a few years because of the way that she was eating, I believe, and writing the book in the way that, like, if you're reading this, I've already passed on to the other side, but I want this message to continue. And yeah, what a powerful warrior she was. She just continues to impact so many people out there. She's amazing, absolutely amazing. But yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
the total title of the book, Status Quo Thinking is Harming Your Health. We have this idea that carbohydrates are essential. You need them. The brain needs them. You're not going to be able to survive without them. They're available now all everywhere all year round, no, regardless of whether you live in the North Pole or at the equator. And it's just that idea has just been so harmful for our health, to the point that now a ketogenic diet sounds like a fad diet, when the reality is the ketogenic diet is the oldest diet that we have. It's the way that we thrive. It's one of two major metabolic mechanisms, ways that we burn fuel. And the other way that we burn fuel, when we fuel ourselves with carbohydrates, is an emergency backup system that should run extremely rarely. Yet we are throttling it as a culture all day, every day for decades. And we wonder why we're having an obesity epidemic. Why are we having a diabetes epidemic? Why are the rates of autism and ADHD and all of these chronic diseases skyrocketing in younger and younger populations, where you see, fatty liver disease in kids under 10, and we're recommending Ozempic for these kids, or bariatric surgery at age 13? Are you kidding me? Like, this is not genetic. Like, we have vastly changed our diets due to a crazy chain of events that paid a lot of it people, and now we have major industries that are multi-trillion-dollar industries making money on our poor health. And so it's pretty crazy, the way all that kind of went down. But yeah, you're right. It's the work of people like her and her courage to step out of the normal medical system and find something different, and not shut up about it and talk about it and get people on it, and literally heal people. It's incredible to find how bad the situation is for most people, but the contrast of that is how much healing we can help people with by getting this message out.
I'd like to play off that for a quick second, because instead of allowing us to both go on the emotional and how sad it is about Sarah being gone, because that'll choke us both up. But I want let's channel it into another direction, because I made a note or two as you were talking on some things I want to follow up on, because you see this, and I'm sure because you're working with athletes all the time, and I'm sure you've got them all the way from high school on up. But I have I have friends, and soon now eventually grandkids, who are going to be in athletics and everything, and they can't go to first or second grade without having 3 snacks brought, so that they can make it from breakfast to lunch, and they have lunch at 10:30. They're going to soccer practice, and the coach is emailing her, make sure you send them with their Gatorade and their fruit snacks, so that when we take a break at after each of the 2 periods in soccer, they can refuel. The insanity and the diabetes and all of the chronic conditions, that just those things right there alone. I mean, tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me that you're seeing this too, right? You understand what I'm talking about. We're
It's
absolutely setting this generation up to be destroyed.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, I'm assuming you didn't need that stuff if you grew up like playing sports. Um, and certainly, like when I was growing up, at the very least, it was like orange slices that we would have. We didn't have fruit snacks at the time. And yeah, now what I see in sports at very young ages for these kids is, like you said, it's like fruit snacks. It's terrible, terrible food. Yeah, it's again, when this idea is allowed to kind of infiltrate And we've given so much power to the pharmaceutical companies, the medical industry, and the food companies. When that's allowed to happen and they profit so much from this, we kind of tend to forget that these are businesses that have a responsibility to make money to their shareholders. They're not in the business of making us healthy. You shouldn't expect that from any of these industries. That's not what they're here to do. They are here to make money. That's what they should do. God bless them. That's what they should do. But the problem is that we're the victims and they need customers. They are very, very good at creating customers from a very young age and keeping those people alive for a very long time. So you have somebody using your products, for decades and decades. You make a lot of money when you do that. And so, yeah, it's really unfortunate, that again, that the chain of events that happened that put us on this course. And the other issue is when you see it around you everywhere, you stop thinking of it as a problem and you just see it as normal when it's not necessarily normal. It's just the average. You walk through the mall, you go to the airport, you see everybody and like, okay, this is what's normal, and it's not normal. It's just the average part of it.
Something I just put in one of my blogs recently. There, you can go look up Guinness World Book and pictures of, like, let's say the circus or the carnival in the 1800s. And so like in 1885, there's the sideshow, the bearded woman and the world's fattest man. You see the picture of the world's fattest man and you have him walk through Walmart right now, he wouldn't stick out. You wouldn't know that this used to be so uncommon because there's 6 other people in the store much heavier than him.
Yeah.
And we're trying to normalize this, saying that this is the new healthy, or it's perfectly okay. And not to fat shame, because my story. I lost 115 pounds and I spent the better part of 15 to 18 years being in that overweight to obese area. And that really helped me with my why once I realized where all of fabrication is, and where you were talking about calorie in, calorie out, TEE and everything with all of this. And it actually doesn't work for anything, and it never works sustained. And that's why we're never going to see reunion shows of the Biggest Losers, because almost all of those people put on much more weight than they started at the time. And when you hear them on interviews on some of our kind of podcasts are getting out there, on how it destroyed, and they never worked with the people like what you would do in a gym. It was just for 5-10 minutes just to make it look like they were doing this every day with these people. But I guess the bigger concept I'm going with there is we just live in a dystopia world. Things are so turned upside down. The food pyramid should have been upside down. And once you do that and take what was the base and make it the rare and occasional thing, everything self-corrects.
Yeah. And even shows like South Park, like, I don't know if you saw the
Well, that's
episode of
exactly.
South Park. It's like, even they know, like, oh, it's a food pyramid. Like, no, it's not. The food pyramid's not going to work. They're like, yes, it is. You just have to turn it upside down. They turn it upside down, everything works. So, yeah, so
Well,
funny.
South Park and The Simpsons. I mean, this was
Nailed it.
Lisa running for president as this of one of her platforms. And I mean, it's just, it's insane how comical it is. But then, you can either get mad or pissed off about it. And I can't remember, and I'm just going to take a quick diversion here. Have we talked about the metabolic revolution yet, you and I?
I don't know that we have.
Let me take a quick second, because with Nina Teicholz, so there is a woman who now lives from Philadelphia, lives in Tel Aviv, Israel. Her name is Jess Apple. She was at Dave Feldman's. Yes. And she presented in Vegas, if you were there for that. And she's created this movement called the Metabolic Revolution, where basically people like us, people like Dr. Cooley, Ovadia, all, Westman, and we can name 1,000 more, who understand the reality of how broken primary care is and how broken the food pyramid is, and it should be like this. We're just like, we're sick of allowing this to happen. So on the weekend that includes Sunday, October 13th, there is in Washington, D.C., that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there's a metabolic psychiatric conference going on there. And so there's now this new organization, an activist organization, but not political, not aligned with any political party or any candidate, but just simply stating And so all of the doctors like Westman and Stapleton and Chris Palmer and Georgia Eady and more. I mean, really great names. I feel bad I don't have all 8 of them right here, but they're all going to take 5 minutes on a stage right next to the Washington Monument, where we're going to do a rally to try to build the awareness. It's also the biggest rally and protest month or weekend in the month of the year in Washington, D.C. So it's going to be crazy. So if you can get to Washington, D.C. and come there, I'm not going to be one of the people speaking, but somebody else that I was networking with introduced me to Jess, and Jess brought me in. And so we do like weekly Zoom meetings and trying to build all this stuff out. But I will shoot you, and you can post on your social media about the metabolic revolution and what it's about. And it's just about really everything that you and I just spent 30 minutes talking about, the reality of that we've come to. And we have to stop killing our kids in the schools, killing our kids on the sports field, killing everybody and destroying public health. Because it's really, when you reflect on it, just how easy is it to really kind of explain to the person, and I'll give you the opportunity to hit this pitch out. It's not hard to explain this. It gets hard because of, what would you give the number one reason on what's hard with helping people adapt to this or get over the standard American diet?
Oh man, well, I think they're up against a lot of different things. I have heard about the metabolic revolution, and you're right. It was amazing to meet Jessica Apple in person in Vegas. She's just absolutely lovely, and her talk there was stunning. She did a wonderful, wonderful job. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. So that would be amazing. But yeah, people have it hard because it's so many messages against them. Um, that are continuing to, again, line the pockets of all these different industries. So on the one hand, people are told about cholesterol, and that, if they eat fat and, they eat red meat in particular, they're going to have high cholesterol. That's one of the narratives. People are told about the fat shaming thing. People are marketed to with foods that are highly palatable and hyper addictive, and people have a hard time stepping away from them. And again, I think there's also this idea that, like, you need carbohydrates, and the way I try to frame it is, a certain level of carbohydrate in your body is so essential that your body has an amazing mechanism to be able to make the exact right amount that you need at any given time. When I play ice hockey once a week, it's later in the day. I always feel better when I play in a fasted state. I feel like I skate faster. My performance is much better. How is it that I'm able to do ice hockey, which is a high heart rate, very intense type of activity, for a good hour and a half when I have not eaten in 20 hours? And the reason is my body is generating enough of the carbohydrate that I need at any given time. It can help fuel my brain, whatever I'm using for energy. All the rest of the cells of your body can then burn fat and ketones as energy, which it breaks down very readily. This is the normal, natural state of the body that it should be in most of the time. This is a state of ketosis. Your body is just using fat as fuel. It's making ketones that are a water-soluble molecule that the body loves to use and will use them readily over carbohydrates. So your body it's so critical that you have exactly the right amount of carbohydrate. Your body will just sort that out for you, which means that carbohydrate in the diet is now non-essential. There's no such thing as any carbohydrate you have to consume. If you think about the way, most of us would have lived, you look at both of our climates. You in Wisconsin, I'm here in Salt Lake City. Today, for the first day at the end of summer, I can see snow on the top of the peaks as we just had a storm roll in. And you see there's a few fruit trees in the neighborhood. There's a few people who garden. I see a few tomatoes, but there's not just like random food spontaneously growing everywhere all the time. And in a few weeks, we're going to have a hard freeze where anything that people didn't already take from the plants and use and preserve is going to be gone, and it's not going to be a viable source of food for them anymore. The problem is, when we went through industrialization of our food, we invented refrigeration, we invented transportation, we started moving things all over the place. I think this is a good example. I hope this isn't too much of a divergence. And
No.
I want to say that this is more of an example of how this may have looked, not necessarily that this is the way that things happen, but in the 1920s, this is from a book called The Stone Age Diet, which was written in like 1975. Really very interesting book. But anyway, he gives this example of like we started to discover vitamins, and then we started to tell people if they didn't get enough of certain vitamins, they would have a vitamin deficiency. So you have a story of a woman walking into her local grocery store in New York City in February and looking around and seeing that there's no tomatoes and asking the store clerk, like, do you not have any fresh tomatoes? I just am learning that like if I don't feed my kid tomatoes, he's going to have a vitamin deficiency. And the clerk may have looked around and said, like, lady, what are you talking about? Like, it's February in New York City. We don't have tomatoes. And also in this example, there may have been a food distributor who was overhearing this conversation and realized that as he was making his way down the east coast of the United States, he may have found in the southern part of the United States truckloads of tomatoes that they didn't know what really to do with, and they were selling them for really cheap. And he may have thought to himself, like, if I can figure out a way to get these from here to there, which was not easy in 1920, if I can figure out a way to be able to do that, I could probably sell these for a great profit and become rich. And sure enough, again, whether that story is exactly the way it went down or it's just an example of like how disconnected we are from our food, I think it's interesting to ponder that like it wasn't that long ago that you could not just eat whatever plant foods, carbohydrate foods you wanted to wherever you were in the world 365 days out of the year, and now you can go to Toronto and eat mangoes and papayas and bananas. It's just a new concept, and that is nothing to say anything about processed food and all the crap that they have in processed food, let alone fruits and vegetables. So again, it's just we're so far removed from how we would have had food in the past and how we get our food today. It's just so different, and it's really impacting us and causing all this chronic disease that we've been talking about.
Well, you just did an incredible answer to actually a weak question, because you took and you did hit the one thing I was going to, which I'll touch on in a second. But you gave such a great elaborate and talked about the multifactorial aspects of all of this. The one thing I was actually throwing the pitch out for, and it's what I find as a health coach with people. It's amazing how many of my clients that I'm finding and now are finding me from being out in these different spaces that are incredibly knowledgeable. I mean, these are people who either, you know, most of them want to lose some weight. Some of them have medical conditions that they don't want to advance. But these are people who have been on Weight Watchers, been on Jenny Craig, done the vegan, done the vegetarian, and everything failed, just like all the programs that you used to try to have to sell, because they weren't designed understanding human physiology. But because we've also gotten so into all the ultra processed foods, and we now know that from the statistics and the federal government got funded studies out of the NIH, 93% of Americans aren't considered metabolically healthy. And one of the reasons of that is probably 80% of those 93% are somewhere on the sugar addiction standpoint. And you have to really help somebody understand what's going on. It caused me to go, and I'm just going to about finish up soon, a sugar and food addiction course. Just and because I also, in my coaching certification from 12, 13 years ago, there was smoking cessation in there, which is dealing with addiction and everything. So, and I understand the basic, because all of our coaching programs that I came out of were 12-step based kind of foundational things. But it's just amazing that, that people just are so tied to things that it's almost like with alcoholism, you got to get to a point where you bottom out and you find your why. And there's just a why strong, not that people have to bottom out and lose their job and everything, because that's not the reality with most people with this kind of an addiction thing, but that they have habits, we'll just call them, that have to get rewired, and it takes time, and it takes an ability to see through and understand how you're going to daily focus on that. I'm not going to go to the freezer at 10 o'clock and pull ice cream sandwiches out of there anymore.
Yeah. Such a great point. I love that. It's interesting. I'm so glad you brought up smoking cessation. It's interesting to contemplate how intimately related smoking cigarettes and sugar actually are. I mean, it's just right at the beginning. Gary Taubes' book, The Case Against Sugar, talks about how the whole reason that you're able to inhale smoke from tobacco is because you soak the leaves in sugar first, which changes the pH level, which allows you to bring the smoke deeper into your lungs to get you more addicted. It's part of what makes cigarettes super addictive is the sugar that changes the pH. Not many people know that. So, with the sugar with cigarette companies, they learned really quickly what play to run to get mass amounts of people addicted. And it's something that Dr. Joan Iflin talks about is the 5 A's. Um, you add addictive substances, you make them very available so you can find them everywhere, you make them really affordable as much as you can. Age is a really important factor, so you want to start at the youngest age possible, and then also you want to do tons of advertising. If you think back in like the 1940s, 1950s, is the big advertising companies were learning that like you don't do a commercial that says here's all the benefits of smoking. You do a commercial that shows this badass looking woman on a street corner smoking a cigarette, and you go, wow, I want to look like her. She's kicking ass and smoking cigarettes. Like, that's cool, I want to do that. And so they run this play and get everybody addicted. Well, we learned what happened with that, and so did the cigarette company. So they ended up buying all the food companies, and they're running the exact same play that they did before. They're working at young ages. If you walk through the supermarket, you see branded, cartoon characters everywhere, whether they're branded, like Toucan Sam or Tony the Tiger, but also things like SpongeBob SquarePants is on all these different foods. They're bright. All the commercials that they're getting during their shows, it's very available. You can get sugar at the hardware store. The kid down the street is selling it at a lemonade stand. Like it's everywhere. It's affordable. All of that stuff. All they did was switch over to food and run the exact same program to get the exact same results.
Absolutely, and there, I'll just tack onto that just a little bit more. And there's something that's called the disinformation playbook, where when you take every single thing that you just said that they did as tobacco, and then they did it to the processed food worlds, but the other things that the tobacco and the sugar industry did beyond all of this was, and there's an evolution to it, and I'll touch on two pieces, but it's fund enough science to confuse the literature so that nobody has a ground to stand on, that they can get. And this is the epitome of how universities raise their money and have endowments and have buckets of money, and that the researchers are always one grant away from not being in business anymore. And then who funds the grants and who does all of this? It's the processed food companies, it's the pharmaceutical companies, and they have science that is pre-written. Many of these researchers even don't get to write their own papers because they're ghostwritten by these organizations, and they're agenda driven. If they're not doing the scientific method to figure out new things, we're so good at understanding how to manipulate the scientific method and to do whether we should be doing an animal study or whether we should be doing it in vitro or whether we should be doing it this type of way, because they understand already how to get the result that's going to give what's going to get printed on USA Today, in the Wall Street Journal, and accepted because it's part of the narrative in the journals. And so, just like how we know that, and it's everywhere, it's been in the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, that in the 60s, Fred Astaire was one of the head of the nutrition department in Harvard, which started because of a $1 million, I might mix up which was one and which was $2 million, but a Kellogg's $1 million endowment and a General Mills $2 million endowment. And he was a Seventh-day Adventist who was predisposed to the whole vegetarian and the predican and the prudent diet and all of these things. And then when it came out of the McGovern Commission in the late 70s, and we created in the USDA this new department that's going to study nutrition, guess who got brought in to be the head of all of that? The guy who got bribed by the sugar industry to write the fat is bad, sugar is good stuff that had nothing to do with facts. And that's what became the food pyramid. And, so it's at every single level. And then in the early 80s, I'll add one more tidbit. We had the Bayh-Dole Act. So Robert Dole, eminent former Republican presidential candidate. He was on both ends of this part of the equation. So in the late 70s, when we call it the McGovern Commission, because McGovern is where it was originally in the 60s, a malnutrition committee that was put together, that then they decided, oh, we need to get rid of fat. Fat is the bad thing that's going on here. They created the guidelines and the law and the Department of USDA for the nutrition studies. So Dole was the leading Republican on that committee. And so it was the two of them that got that pushed through. But then with Senator Bayh, they wrote the Bayh-Dole Act in '81, which made it just so instrumental for all of the tobacco, the pharma, the food, to that when researchers get grants to do these things, the researchers and the CDC and the FDA and the NIH people that are also assigning the grants and overseeing all these things, that they all get paid on the revenue of the product being approved, which is why, and not to get overly political, but this hits it home more than anything else with what we've learned in the last 4 years of how the playbook and the Bayh-Dole Act all come together in, we'll call it unintended consequences, but the employees at the NIH and CDC just received $700 or $800 million from Moderna, from pharmaceutical, because they owned all of this, and this law and everything just created the incentives. Because if we learned anything from Warren Buffett and now his partner Charlie Munger that passed, if you want to see an outcome, follow the incentives. So all of the incentives, the universities and the professors are going to make the huge dollars on what comes through. It has nothing to do with pure research anymore. And I'm not trying to say every researcher in the world is corrupt. I'm saying the system we've created that is allowing all of these things to happen, the incentives are creating outcomes that are harming us.
Wow. I actually didn't know about that act in 1981. So yeah, thanks for
81 or 82. It might have been 82, but Bayh-Dole. So you can look that up. And so yeah, but when you start studying all this stuff, because I came out of 30 years of health insurance and population health management, wellness, disease management, and a short stint in pharma, and I'm looking back at this in 2018 as I'm breaking my brain, and then I have to go, how did all this happen? How did I spend 30 years of my professional career in almost every single industry that, now I love doctors and I'm thankful we have orthopedic surgeons and people who do surgery and do ER stuff. But there's a lot of doctors I talk to where they realize that most primary care, when you're following the guidelines that aren't structured around healing, and they're structured the way they are to create perpetual clients for pharma, for the systems, and the doctors are no longer autonomous in their own practices, that this just creates that most primary care doctors following the guidelines, bringing Dr. Sarah back in this, to reverse diabetes, you have to ignore the guidelines. And the guidelines create most doctors, and this is the most cognitive dissonance for them, and this might have come out of a little bit with your talk with Dr. Cooley, that they're doing more harm, and it's just because they're not taught everything in medical school. There's so many gaps in the foundation of their learning. They only understand ketoacidosis. They don't understand that babies are born in ketosis. Mother's breast milk is 60% saturated fat. That this is a whole new physiologic state that most of the world's living in that never happened 100 years ago. Anyhow, it broke my brain so much that I found the Gary Taubes, the Nina Teicholz's, and the Jessica Apples of the world who have done this incredible lifting and figuring out all of this stuff and make it into a story that, oh, you mean people will try to do things that behoove the interest of their financial situation? Oh, this is a new thing in the world, isn't it?
Shocker.
Oh my God.
Shocker. No, that's such a great point. I'll steal this from somebody I interviewed last week. Her name is Dr. Jody Nishida. She is in Hawaii, and she started a practice called the Keto Prescription. I'll be a pharmacist, like I said, and she helped get somebody off of all their diabetes medications and got a call from the general practitioner, the main doctor, who gave her an earful and was yelling at her for getting this person off of her medications. So she said it was a little, kind of strange. She's getting yelled at, and so she waits for this woman to calm down a little bit, and kind of puts the phone back to her ear and says, okay, so why are you actually upset? Like, I don't understand. Like, we made your patients better. Why are you upset with me? And it came out that she's like, well, now I don't have a patient to see. I lost a patient that I don't get to see anymore. And like, that's the reality. And like, when you talk about incentives, that is how the system is incentivized. So you're right. Like, these good doctors who have the best intentions go to school, they learn that the best thing to do is, learn which prescription you need to write for which ailment that you're treating. We've separated everything out so the doctors are not trained to see the whole picture. They're only trained to see, such a small part of the body, tiny, tiny part of the body. And they only know that they're in a system that they have to write prescriptions in 5 minutes and get somebody out of their office. That's all they do. And so I get, I go back and forth on this, but I'm more of the opinion when people say, like, we need to get our doctors more nutrition education. It would be amazing if we could educate our doctors to have more education. And I honestly kind of push back on that and say, like, you know what? If they did, they'd be probably getting way more of the wrong information. They'd probably be way more indoctrinated in the wrong thing. And I believe they'd be less likely to be those great doctors that you and I know that are failing. They're failing their patients. Their own health is failing. Dr. Brian Lenskis, Dr. Tro Kalayjian, Dr. Sean Bay, all these different people who were forced to look at what was going on and say, this is not working for myself. This is not working for my patients. What else is there out there? And then magically they find these amazing people, like you mentioned, the journalists, Gary Taubes and Nina Teicholz, and all these articles and books and all these amazing resource, all the talks that people do. And I think that's the only way that more people are going to find out about this. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I think most people become doctors for the very, very, very best reasons.
And they're
And
not bad people. It's the
no,
system that they live in, that they were trained in. And I think you just made a brilliant point. Casey, everything you've said today is dead on and I believe brilliant. But this point was just so good because yes, so just as with Ryan, who you'll have his episode out, Dr. Cooley, who I co-host another podcast with, he had a heart event and I realized I had plaque. And so I'm like, well, what are you going to do different now that you know this? And he's like, oh, well, we're becoming vegans. And I'm like, well, I found a different protocol that's reversed calcified plaque documented in a number of people. And it has nothing to do with that. And it took a while to kind of break his brain because the cognitive dissonance, and like you just said, and I have nothing against plants. I still eat some plants, just not a lot. But it's just one of those things that most likely you go looking, you're right, you're going to find the wrong information, but because that's the popular narrative. But what you have to figure out is, what were you not taught in med school? Why do you only think there's a negative side to ketosis, that you don't understand that it's been something that most of our ancestors lived in for all of their life? It was rare to have people move out of ketosis for more than 3 to 4 hours after a big meal and a big hunt and so forth. So, but once they understand the real physiology of how the body works, it becomes quite easy for them to connect the dots and put this all together, like the Dr. Troes, like the Westmans, like now Ryan, and how he's having tenfold success in the last 5 years than he had over his previous 20 years of being a cardiologist. And I'm just going to say, we had some serendipity happening because you had an interview. I did one Thursday last week with an RN who I introduced you to just recently, Laura. And she's been a 28-year keto before going 5-year carnivore. And she had the same thing with a doctor coming back at her, that working with the patient that was having, a 910 A1C level, so way out of control diabetic. She brought her back down, the patient down to a normal A1C, and she's no longer even pre-diabetic. And the doctor says, no, I don't like them coming down that low. I want them to stay in the 8 range, which is wildly uncontrolled. But Laura pointed out that she understands exactly why, because Medicare will pay them $900 as a specialist every time that diabetic comes in for their quarterly management appointment. So that's $3,600 just for seeing somebody for 15 minutes 4 times a year that doctor's no longer getting anymore. And the doctor threatened to write her up for her license by curing people.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
And
Yeah.
so she'll do that story with you too. It's just the system that we're living in right now. And I don't want doctors being disrespected. The amount of time, effort, and debt they had to go into to get to where they are. But now they've got the most ultimate golden handcuffs because they came out with $500,000 in debt. They no longer are in control of their practices. They have to do what the system says, or go and try to be a trailblazer and do it on their own. And more are doing that and having success with it, thank God.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've kept you for almost an hour now, Casey. Are there, we've, I think, covered some really incredible topics, and you've shown that this is exactly why I wanted you on here, because you're so well educated and you talk so well and understand not just the physiology of it all, but you've put together all of the nuggets as far as what's going on and what's led to all of this. Any last things you'd like to say? Well, first of all, before you have a last minute, I'm going to have Casey's contact information, because Casey does do incredible amount of job of personal training, nutrition training, coaching people. So if you want to reach out to Casey, you'll have his email address, his website, and everything in the show notes. But why don't you really quick just say them real quick, and then they know what they're looking for.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you again for the opportunity. You're a natural host. I love your curiosity, and you added a lot of really great insights. So you're definitely a natural as a podcast host. And I'm excited to see your future content as well. Did such a great job. The main place that most people can go is just our website, which is called myboundlessbody.com. Simple to remember. All of our socials are there. The podcast that we do called Boundless Body Radio is there. Find our YouTube there. There's also the first thing that you'll see on the site is just a simple book now button. We're like you, where we want people to have a free resource where they can book a consultation with us, and we can just have a chat to see, first of all, whether we're a good fit, or we can offer any counsel or advice for people. I know you offer that as well. So that's really the best website. The best resource is the website, which again is myboundlessbody.com.
Excellent. And so that'll be all in the show notes for everybody to find. And find Casey. He's going to help you. He's amazing. Casey, any other last final comment you want to kind of drop as we've gone deep on a lot of different things. So but maybe there's just one more thing in reserve you want to say?
I would just reiterate the point you made earlier. Flip the food pyramid, and you would probably be more healthy than most people. Like, where you get the best health from is focusing your diets on animal fats and proteins by taking your carbohydrates down as low as you can potentially tolerate, regardless of whether that's, a few hundred calories of or grams of carbohydrates, or on down through the scale of low carbohydrate, ketogenic, carnivore, wherever you land as far as that goes. If you start by just focusing on the fats and proteins, get plenty of that, eat until you're very satiated, I think you'll make huge steps forward in your progress in your health, and really not be as reliant on some of these industries that are making tons and tons and tons of money on keeping us very sick. So
that's a great way to end it. I'm going to let it go there. I'm going to hit stop recording.